And I am very excited to introduce to you guys Caralena Peterson. She is the author of the upcoming book, The Effortless Perfection Myth, about the gender issues today's women run into in college. She graduated from Duke University 5 years ago with majors in women's studies and public policy. She has published articles with Inside Higher Ed, The Week, She Knows Media, Miss Magazine, Rewire News, Bustle, Garnet News, Women's E-News, and Elite Daily. She is also a mixed medium artist whose work has appeared in the New York Times and Washington Life magazine. When she is not busy with all of her side hustles, Caralena works full-time as a high school history and English teacher at an all-girls school in New Orleans.
Thank you all for having me. Thank you to Phi Mu Fraternity, especially Jill Mahar and Andrea Anderson, to the National Women's History Museum in Washington, D.C., to Cornell, and also to Inside Higher Ed, She Knows Media, and The Week for originally publishing the articles of mine from which parts of this talk were crafted. So let's talk about effortless perfection. Along with which professors to avoid and the best places to buy late-night food on campus, one of the first pieces of advice that I received during my freshman college orientation week was to be weary of effortless perfection. Or the expectation that one should be smart, accomplished, fit, beautiful, and popular, and that somehow all of these things would somehow occur without any visible effort. The term was coined at my alma mater, Duke University, in 2003, and has since been used to describe the cultural climate on campuses all across the US, especially by women. At first, I wrote it off as a superficial cliche, but as a somewhat recent college graduate who sometimes feels like she just barely survived college, I've come to see that it needs to be considered a major mental health concern. Most of us do not go into college expecting to experience a major drop in confidence. We expect the best 4 years of our lives. And from the outside looking in, that narrative fits. Women now outpace men in college enrollment. As we achieve and excel at unprecedented rates, our generation appears to be comprised of nothing but brilliant, strong, unbreakable females with the world at our fingertips. But I know from personal experience that too often this is just the story from a distance. From the outside looking in, the story can sometimes have a little bit of a different feel to it. The majority of female undergrads are leaving college with less self-esteem than they came in with, while our male peers tend to leave with more. We're questioning ourselves in academic and leadership roles due to gendered phenomena like imposter syndrome and stereotype threat. An estimated 10 to 20% of us develop eating disorders during our college years. We're experiencing depression at twice the rate of our male peers. And nobody is catching on because all of this is hidden beneath a gilded front of effortless perfection. The act that many of us are putting on is too convincing. While working on my upcoming book, The Effortless Perfection Myth, I interviewed female identifying undergraduates of different races, sexualities, and socioeconomic statuses at 15 institutions of higher learning all across the US. These institutions included small, private liberal arts colleges like Colgate and large public schools like the University of Alabama. I asked my interviewees to describe the effortlessly perfect girl to me and got the following responses.
Doing well in her classes and flows with her professors.
Yes, good grades.
She is intellectual, but not intellectually loud.
Smart without being intrusive.
She is a partier, but a straight-A student.
She is popular, involved. She is available to everyone. She always has time to give, energy to give.
Charismatic and self-sacrificing.
Friendly without being overbearing.
She goes out to party, but doesn't drink too much or get high too much.
Preferably, she has a sex or love life.
Hooks up with a guy every once in a while, but is okay with it. if they don't like call her back.
She is attractive but innocent.
Beautiful without being seductive or lecherous.
Skinny.
She is supportive, endlessly happy, endlessly energetic.
She's happy, or she seems happy.
She is brave but not bold.
A female undergraduate at Virginia Tech summed up effortless perfection as the intense pressure to get good grades, be a good person, good daughter, good friend, be beautiful, and have it all seem like it's just flowing out of you as who you are and not something you constantly have to think about or reach for. What am I if I'm not this effortlessly perfect version of myself that lives up to the expectations put on me by everybody else? Another female student at High Point asked me. Although the term effortless perfection was coined 16 years ago, it only recently appeared in a scientific journal. A study by Lee Travers of Loyola University Chicago and Eden Randall of Boston Children's Hospital was published in the American Psychological Association Journal in 2015. The study notes a clear link between the pursuit of effortless perfection and a decrease in mental health. They attribute this to two tendencies. One, only comparing oneself to those deemed socially and academically above oneself, and two, incorrectly believing that qualities like intelligence are innate or fixed, thus requiring no effort, as opposed to needing to be acquired through hard work, trial, and tribulation. The two experts conclude that in an increasingly competitive world, those who model effortless perfection may be attempting to establish themselves in line with a new and distinguishing feature of success that establishes its so-called superiority by appearing to occur naturally and with ease. In other words, there's no room for struggle. My personal experiences, along with the research I've gathered and the interviews I've conducted, have led me to the following conclusion. Effortless perfection creates an environment wherein we are so set on making it seem like we have everything put together at all points in time that when we do inevitably run into struggle, which we're going to do because it's college and it's life, we look around at our seemingly flawless peers and assume that we are the only ones struggling. We do not realize the extent to which every other member of our community is carefully holding their cards close to their chest, unwilling to show anything beyond a socially accepted front of confident ease. We conclude that there is no other way to deal with our problems but alone if we do not wish to stand out as broken or the one who couldn't keep up. Unfortunately, this self-imposed isolation or sense of being the only one causes the consequences of such struggles to become much more harmful and much more extreme than they might otherwise be. No wonder student demand for college counseling and psychological services increased an average of 30% between 2009 and 2015, while enrollment only grew 6%. Or why 57% of women surveyed by the American College Health Association in 2013 reported having experienced episodes of overwhelming anxiety in the last year. 33% additionally reported having experienced depression that made it difficult to function in the same year. Part of this is no doubt the culture of compare and despair created by effortless perfection that makes loneliness and anxiety seem almost inevitable at times. To break the pattern, there is one major thing we need to understand. This is the first of my two key takeaways. The effortless perfection myth derives from a universal lie, a false promise we have long held to be true and even modeled our lives after, that reaching perfection will ensure us security and happiness. One Georgetown University student said, "I used to think if something is perfect, then it doesn't have to change. It's in a complete state, and it can't be questioned. Nobody can complain about you, or reject you, or pick fights with you." Embodying perfection in her mind meant having no weaknesses, and having no weaknesses in turn meant never having to experience hurt. Because of this, she had come to associate any flaws and imperfections with a breach in the safety and stability of her life. Her approach to the world around her was to limit the variability of things like romantic relationships, popularity, and academic successes by approaching them as facets of her life to be mastered and maintained. In many ways, this approach had worked well for her. She was valedictorian of her high school. She gave modeling a shot in college and had been successful. However, things unraveled as she was forced to reckon, as she was forced to reckon with the reality that there would always be things outside of her control. Her equation did not have room for lack of control. Instead, any hurt she felt or rejection she experienced could only be attributed to her imperfections. In her mind, the blame fell solely on her shoulders. Her mental health was impacted as she was struck by the disparity between what she had expected and what had actually happened. Believing that effortless perfection would serve as her suit of armor, she had yet to learn that perfectionism will not shield anyone from failure or rejection, regardless to how close we come to achieving it. This disparity is incredibly important to understand because the concept of effortless perfection can often get dismissed as a petty, superficial issue based on upholding flawless appearances. It is so much more than that. Effortless perfection for many is nothing short of survival instinct, a necessary form of self-protection, which explains why we feel compelled to chase after it with such fervor. The pursuit is addictive because it distracts us from the things within us that scare us most. Instead of facing our internal doubts, we adopt the effortless perfection myth as our core belief system because it falsely promises to banish pain, fear, and insecurity from our lives altogether. We embrace it, even support it among our peers, without recognizing that this mode of operation entails being pushed by our fears as opposed to pulled by our passions. Our lives become all about what's not happening to us, as opposed to what is. And we are transformed from human beings into human doings, existing but not experiencing all that life is and can be. Many of today's college students are chasing after accomplishment as if it were a cure-all, without recognizing they are really just harboring a need for reassurance. We crave good grades, a low weight on the bathroom scale, a high number of likes on social media. In our minds, achieving these things means everything will be okay. Unfortunately, instead of gaining control through this approach, we often relinquish even more power. Each mini confidence boost we receive every time we live up to perfectionist standards leads us to develop self-confidence based upon fleeting conditional moments. The stronger our reliance on these boosts, the greater our reliance on external approval grows, and the more entrapped we become within the toxic culture of effortless perfection. A first-generation Vanderbilt student told me she identified strongly with this concept. Without parents who had institutional knowledge to guide her through college, she made it her mission to take everything head on. She felt the need to do it all, and to do it all very, very well. But there were consequences to the pressure she placed upon herself to achieve. In middle school, she would throw up. In high school, she would break out in hives. In college, she got bad mouth ulcers and was even hospitalized for exhaustion at one point. It was this anxiety that drove me, a fear of falling behind, she explained. She never considered how far she had already come, only how far she had left to go. As a woman of color from a lower income background, her pursuit of effortless perfection was even more intense because it was complicated by issues many of her white, upper-class peers were privileged to not have to confront. She felt she had even further to go to catch up to being on the so-called right track. She noted the internships her peers landed, where they were from, how affluent they appeared to be, and those things became her benchmarks for what success looked like. She was swept up in the same mass delusion many of her peers also held about there being one singular path to achieving a successful life. This leads me to my second of my two key takeaways. Effortless perfection forces us into a mindset where we believe there is only one way to succeed. We fall into a pattern of pursuing that one prescribed image of success, as opposed to developing our own unique and authentic identities. Image versus identity. An image is something we must constantly strive for. It causes us to fall into patterns of I will be happy when I blank. Get into med school, lose the weight, catch so-and-so's attention. We use these things to try to create proof that we're winning whatever it is we're supposed to be winning. We seek to create a sense of self out of grade point average, Instagram likes, and other forms of social and academic capital. In contrast, an identity is something we take on when we recognize that we are enough as we are now. It is something we are simply by being and living in the moment. No proof or validation necessary because it doesn't have to measure up to standards defined by anybody other than ourselves. The biggest difference is that an identity is permanent, while an image can only be achieved in brief moments. We reach it and embody it, but then the moment shifts, or the image alters, and we fall back into hot pursuit. It's exhausting, like running on a treadmill that only goes faster. And we need to be asking ourselves, why does it matter how fast I can run if I'm not actually making any ground? Because let's face it, we aren't making any ground. And that's why we need to push back and challenge the dominant narrative of effortless perfection we see on social media and around campus, with alternative, more honest narratives that recognize struggle as normal and healthy. This begins by sharing our stories of failure along with our stories of success. Luckily, a small but growing body of campaigns and organizations has already begun to take up this torch. Half the Story encourages individuals to share part of their lives that exist outside the standard social media by posting more than just a highlight reel of our best moments and instead bringing up taboo issues like belonging and mental health as well. The What I Be Project creates photo campaigns, often on college campuses, that allows individuals to highlight their insecurities while also using their own words to frame those stories the way they want them to be told. Me Too Monologues, established at Duke roughly a decade before the hashtag #MeToo movement, curates a theatrical performance of monologues that students write and submit anonymously about struggles with identity issues like race, gender, sexuality, socioeconomic status, mental health, religion, and ability. The program has spread to multiple other university campuses due to its national expansion campaign. Each of these platforms encourages undergrads to show enough of their own vulnerabilities that others do not feel the need to hide their own. If we want to push back against the effortless perfection myth and the mental health crisis it has helped to create on our college campuses, institutions all across the US need to create and support vital efforts such as these. I challenge you all to find ways to implement such changes on your campus, in your communities, and in yourselves. And if you remember nothing else from this talk, Remember my 2 big takeaways. We need to switch our focus from chasing an unattainable image to developing an authentic identity. And the effortless perfection myth derives from a universal lie that reaching perfection will ensure us security and happiness, when in fact, it leaves us running on a treadmill that only goes faster. It's time to get off the treadmill. Thank you.